I remember laying in bed all the time, all on my off time. I had to take so many days off of work, and I would always be in bed, and I would just this it just felt like I was living in this black cloud. And I remember just like yelling out one day, like yelling out to God, like, please, please, like send me something, send me a sign, send me something, like either get me out of this body and take me, or get me better, like send me a sign and I'll do whatever it takes. And I'm not kidding, Emily, like that week somebody pointed me to you. And I'll never forget when I found your story. I was like, I can make it. Like I have a chance because she did this. And I've been doing it wrong the whole time.
All right, today, guys, I have one of the most exciting conversations for me personally. I think you guys will like it too. But the reason it's so powerful for me personally is because this is the first interview that I have done with somebody that I have helped that I have never met before.
Mhm.
I'd like to introduce you guys to Colleen. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so Colleen and I have been interacting on Instagram, maybe even YouTube, I don't know. But we've
Mhm.
been on social media for a couple of years now. I think
Mhm.
it's been a
Yeah.
while. And
Well, I think the first time I contacted you was last year. Yeah.
okay, okay. Um, and for me personally, um, I give this information. I give this information, and then everybody chooses how they want to use this information. They can either sit back and go, oh, that's a cute story, Emily, that you resolved your multiple sclerosis. I'm happy for you, but that's not going to work for me. Or
Mhm.
I'm happy for you, Emily. That's too hard for me. Or like you, they say, you're telling me there's a chance. And you
Mhm.
jump right in the deep end and you
Jump.
go all in and you
Mhm.
literally transformed your life. So, Colleen,
Mhm.
please tell us your story and where you were before, what you did, and where you're at now.
Okay, yes. So before carnivore, I was a hot mess. I grew up with the standard American diet, and aside from my mother's home cooked meals, thank God I had those. Aside from that, my diet was always like a dumpster fire, and I always refer to it as that because now that I know what I know, it was all the colorful junk foods and just everything that was horrible for you. And so I can track back now that I know what I know. I'm able to scan back in my life, and I'm like able to connect the dots and add everything up. And I'm like, oh, I was inflamed. That's why I was so tired all of the time. That's why my eyes were always puffy and sore. That's why I had allergies. That's why I had stomach issues. It's why I would feel fatigued like as a teenager. And then um, that's why I didn't get a regular period when I came to that age. And it was never regular. It was painful when I did get it. I contracted mono and then Epstein-Barr. So that was like adding another fuel to the fire because, like, battling Epstein-Barr is brutal. So it makes you exhausted and tired and fatigued. So I always had that going on. And then fast forward to like the age about 25, I watched a vegan documentary and that sucked me in. And I was like, oh, maybe this will be the answer because backtrack real quick. Around the age of 16, I don't know what happened, but well, I do know what happened now because it was my horrible diet, but I just stopped being able to go to the bathroom like on my own, like almost ever. So I got chronic constipation when I was around the age of 16. And I would have to take laxatives. I would have to somebody like told me about like brand cereal, so I started eating that just to make myself go to the bathroom. And around the age of 25, I watched this vegan documentary, and they do a really good job at what they do.
Yeah.
Because it's really convincing and compelling. And I love animals. So there was that aspect of it. And, and so I'm like, oh, I want to do the best for my body. So I started making all these green smoothies, and the green smoothies helped relieve some of the constipation because
Yeah.
all that roughage. So of course you're going to have some relief with that. So, but in, my little brain at the time, I'm just like, oh, it's helping this problem. This has to be the way. So that led me down the plant-based life, so I was like plant-based from then. Within 2 to 3 years, I wasn't perfectly plant-based, but I was mostly plant-based, and I was oxalate bombing the hell out of myself. Within like 2 to 3 years of doing that, I developed kidney stones, which were horrific to pass. And I still have a couple left over in there. But they haven't bothered me at all since going carnivore. And I developed thyroid nodules, and like my thyroid came back wonky in blood work. So I just continued to have bad gut health, a really terrible immune system. I had a horrible immune system since I was a little kid. Like things just seemed to affect me so much more drastically than others, and it would take me forever to recover. Like chronic sinus issues and all that. And then, so after I turned plant-based, mostly plant-based, and it's 2 to 3 years worth of this stuff. And now I'm in the age of 28, 29, and my skin starts breaking out really bad.
At 29?
Yeah, like 28, 20. That's what I mean. I was going crazy, Emily, because I was like, am I in puberty? Like, what is this? Like, why is my skin going nuts? And I couldn't even connect the dots even then because I was so brainwashed. Because I was convinced like this had to be healthy. So there's something, so I was on every supplement. Like if you name a supplement, I've probably tried it. Like I had every supplement in the book. That was another thing. Like it's so nice in my new life to not have a million supplements because you don't need them anymore. So yes, amen to that. So I'm like going crazy trying to research everything about like what could clear up skin, like why is my skin doing this? And it would get like rosacea-y, like I almost like red rashes. I eventually developed scalp issues and scalp psoriasis. My skin was really dry, like horribly dry and flaky. Like my forehead would literally flake. And so I was researching. I stumbled across the vegan world. And then, so I was convinced that like, oh, people in there were all saying their skin cleared up and stuff. So I was like, so maybe that's what I need to do. Maybe I need to go like full vegan, and just like being plant-based isn't good enough. I need to push it another level. And that was kind of tough for me because by nature, I love meat. Like I naturally love meat. So I was like, but I was also convinced that red meat had to be bad for you because there was all this messaging and all of the research and all of the warnings from society about red meat being bad for you. So I was kind of buying into it, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go vegan. So I basically followed this like raw vegan, where you eat like raw vegan all day with a ton of fruit. There was like this one influencer that pushed this like really crazy diet where you eat raw vegan all day and then a cooked vegan meal for dinner time. So I was like, let me try this. This girl looks great. And, let's try it and see how I do. It was the most painful thing I've ever done in my life because I was in so much stomach pain. And you would think after like a week or two of that, you'd be like, this isn't working. But no, I was like, let me stick with this. And, everyone was saying like, it'll calm down and blah, blah, adjustment. And I do understand that with like a drastic diet change, there is adjustment period. I even have to tell that now to like carnivore clients of mine that there is an adjustment period. This was like different. So I didn't even last a year doing this. So this was like 7 months in. I was like, I'm tapping out because this is so painful. The bloating, the gas pain was like unbearable. It would take me out. Yeah. I would literally have to lay down at work on my table
Yep.
at work, like on my lunch period, and not in front of students, but like on my lunch or on my prep, like on any time, my off time, I would literally have to like lay down on my table to try and like alleviate the horrible gas pain. And my skin did not get much better. Um, and a lot of people that know me would probably be surprised to hear that, because I did hide it pretty well. There is good makeup, and then it would like come and go. I always kind of battled it. I do think like the removal of like some processed foods helped at least a little bit with it, and maybe like with my energy a little bit. But other than that, I was in so much pain with my gut health. So I ditched that after like 7 months. I was like, I cannot do this. This is just too painful. I don't know how people live like this. I don't know how people eat so much fruit and consume so much fruit, and their stomachs aren't. And that's another thing. I looked like I was pregnant. I was so bloated. It was horrible. So I went back to kind of my old plant-based model. And the one that was comfortable for me and didn't cause me that much discomfort and pain. And at this point, I would sometimes, and now that I'm carnivore, I always say like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed to say this, but at this point, I treated steak as like a cheat food, because I was told that red meat is bad. But I loved it so much. I love red meat. So when we would go out to like a nice restaurant, I would order a filet, and I was like, well, I ate good all week, so this is my cheat. And I'm so looking back, I'm like, thank God I cheated with meat, because maybe that's like what saved me from completely, I don't know. But yeah, like I think that held me up for a little bit. But and I think I brought eggs back in. I always loved eggs and bacon. It was like my favorite foods were really animal foods my whole life, but I pushed them aside thinking, this was the best for my health because of the brainwashing. And so, my hormones were definitely wonky. Like things weren't perfect. I always struggled with tiredness, exhaustion, fatigue, fogginess. In the summer of 2017, now this is where my MS story takes a little bit of a twist from some people's. However, I've since met a lot of people that have said that their MS happened, did their symptoms and their MS wasn't diagnosed till after a neck trauma. So this is a little curveball in my story. I was accompanying my mother, and the ironic part about this part of my story is I was working for a plant-based MLM company.
How funny.
Like you can't make it up.
Yeah.
So I was accompanying my mother to her chiropractor because she was like, you should come with me because he's really into like natural stuff and plant-based stuff. He's into all of that. I bet you like he'd be into this. So I was accompanying her thinking like, oh, cool. I could like sell this to him, or he'll be into it and he'll hop on board. And while I was there, he convinced me to get an adjustment. And long story short, I woke up the next day after letting him adjust me, and he had cracked my neck. And I remember thinking, I'll never forget that right before he went to go crack my neck, I remember thinking that gut feeling that you get when you have a gut intuition told me no. It told me, do not do this. And I just like pushed it aside and was like, stop it. You're being ridiculous. Like your own mother comes here all the time. Like, this is fine. So I just went with it. The next day I woke up with an absolute explosion of symptoms that were like, it incapacitated me. Like I couldn't wake up. I felt like I was in like a drug induced coma almost. And like I was trying to wake up out of a drug induced state. And I remember like my eyes could not open, and they were like swollen shut. I just was so inflamed. I was so fogged out and out of it that I couldn't even be bothered to like even think about like what happened, because all I wanted to do was sleep. It was just like, I think I always describe like I would be able to get out of bed to go to the bathroom and then get back to bed, but I would like have to like scale the walls because I was so disoriented, so out of it, so fogged. And so that I was in bed for like days on end with those symptoms. And like after a while, like coming around, and I remember being like, what happened to me? Like, what I didn't even connect it right away to the adjustment, because again, that's another thing we're so programmed or in society that we just accept these things. Like everybody gets adjusted. Neck adjustments can't hurt anybody, but they can. They're not for everybody. The same way like medicines aren't for everybody. So like it just didn't fare well with me. And when I finally did come around enough, I remember asking around and being like, what the heck happened? Like, what could this? And then my husband was like, maybe it was connected to the adjustment, because that didn't happen until after your adjustment. And I always heard that you're not supposed to let people touch your neck. And I was like, great. I never heard that. So like, why didn't you tell me? And I wish I knew this. I called the chiropractor who did this, and he was like, that's weird. Usually if that's going to happen, it happens right away. And then like, we just fix it with another adjustment and people are fine. I'm like, oh. So he was like, why don't you come back in? I was like, no, thank you. Like, I can't risk making anything worse. So I'm so glad I didn't do that. And so anyway, I continued to ask around, and people were like, it sounds like you have vertigo, because I kept describing how I felt like dizzy, but without actually spinning, but I felt dizzy because I felt like off in my head, like disoriented. And so I was sent to an ENT, and they were thinking it was something in the inner ear. I did all the audiology testing. I did all, he sent me for a brain MRI, because right away he was like, I don't like that this happened post a chiropractic neck adjustment, because I guess he's not a fan of those as an ENT. He must see some stuff. So he's like, I want to make sure you didn't have a stroke. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. So I was like, I had no idea there was any association, or I would never have gotten my neck touched. So anyway, long story short, MRI comes back clear aside from slight white matter changes. And so he wasn't concerned about that. There were no MS lesions at this time. It just said slight white matter changes and no signs of a stroke. So he wasn't worried. He sent me on my way, and off I went. And I was like, okay, so if my brain MRI is clear, like I have to be fine. So I was like, I just have to get over it, but I have to learn to live with this added symptom of like this disorientation and dizziness. And then like, that became even more exacerbated, those brain symptoms, the more I ate what I was eating, all the grains, all the oxalate bombs that I was having. And then also I would throw in some processed stuff once in a while, because those like cheap foods. So between that formulation, it exacerbated all of these brain symptoms because of all that added inflammation. And I just didn't know this. And so, I get pregnant that like fall, and I just tried to the excitement of the baby took over. And so I just tried to be like, you know what, like, I don't feel right. I don't feel the same. Oh, I had to go on Adderall, in order to function.
Yeah.
So that's another thing with you that resonated with me, like the need for a chemical amphetamine in order to just wake you up, to keep your eyes open and get you out of bed. That was pretty crappy. And I had to stay on a low dose of it even through pregnancy, because I was told like the benefit outweighs the risk. So like, and because I didn't want to lose my job, I would have never been able to keep my job without an amphetamine.
Oh.
Like there's just no way. I would have never made it through a day.
No.
And yeah, so I had to do it. And so anyway, I go through my pregnancy, and I tried to be as healthy as I could, but then like I was so defeated in my pregnancy, because I felt so crappy. And so I threw all caution to the wind at some point in my pregnancy, and I was just like, screw this. I'm just eating whatever I want, because I just can't, I just feel like I just was like so defeated. And at this point, I didn't know what I know now. So of course I craved so much sugary stuff, sugary cereals, sugary treats. And I ended up with gestational diabetes.
Of course.
And yeah. And here I am like an idiot. And I'm like, how did this happen? I'm not even overweight. Like, like, because we're just so misguided. And I said to this was a specialist that I was talking to, and I was like, how did this happen? And he's like, I'm like, cause I mean, I have been eating a lot of sugar. So is it that? And he goes, no, it has nothing to do with diet. He told me it has nothing to do with diet. And I wish I could go back, and part of me almost wants to have another baby just to prove him wrong. Because there's no way, if I was eating how I do now, I would ever be diagnosed with any form of diabetes ever. So I was truly like perplexed, and I was like, really? It has nothing to do with diet? Because I really have been eating pretty badly. Like, I'll admit it to you. Like, I've been eating a lot of sugary stuff. Like, I just been craving sweets. And he's like, no, it has nothing to do with diet. Trust me. It's just a hormone. It either turns off on for some people and not for others. It's just random. And then once you have the baby, you'll be fine. I'm like, now I was like, wow, okay. So I believed that. And I went on with my life. But now, also knowing what I know, I definitely had blood sugar issues, and I definitely was a pre-diabetic, I think. And I had insulin and blood sugar issues because I would have so many times pre-baby and post-baby where I was doing all like the fruit juices and plant juices, and I would be on like the high, and then I would crash and literally feel like I'm going into like a black hole and feel like I'm dying in that crash. And that's blood sugar issues. Like, I have not experienced that once when I cut all that out and I turned carnivore. So it was blood sugar issues. And so anyway, I have my son, best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm just high on the baby hormones and the baby loves. And I'm very lucky. I had considering what I went through with my, with all my other stuff, I had a pretty great postpartum experience, and I'm very blessed for that. And once I finished breastfeeding, I guess like hormones shifted, and I breastfed for over a year. So once that completed, things just shifted, and I like all my symptoms came like plowing back at me, just like hit me like a truck. And I'll never forget, I literally like midday, one day we were home all together as a family, and I just laid down on the bed. Like, we had just first of all, I couldn't get out of bed. Second of all, I was like, I felt like I would be awake and my eyes would just be burning. And I laid down in the bed. We were supposed to like go do something, and I was like, I cannot move. I remember saying to my husband, I feel like I am being poisoned to death. I feel like I'm literally dying. Like, I just feel like I'm being poisoned. And the lack of energy, the brain fog, the fatigue, the sensation that like, you just can't, just being alive in your body felt too taxing for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally felt taxing just to be alive.
Many times I would say, I have nothing left to give.
Mm-hmm. That's how I felt.
I don't have anything else.
Just keeping my eyes open felt taxing. Keeping my eyes open. I would open my eyes and they would burn, and they would be inflamed, and they would be puffy. And I felt so gross too. Like, I felt so ugly. It felt like it was aging me. I remember feeling so old. Yeah. I felt like I was so much older than I was. And it made me look older. And I remember my face being puffy. And around this time, someone brought to my attention, like, maybe you have breast implant illness, because I had breast implants. And I was like, oh, well, maybe that's what this is. And like, maybe that'll help me. So I went ahead and got my breast implants removed, which I do not. What? I'm sorry?
What year did you get the explant?
The year I got them removed was 2020. Okay. Because I remember I had like COVID tested and everything. And so when I finally got them removed, it was like the summer of 2020. And I don't regret it at all. I actually would have wanted to proceed with removing them anyway, especially like having MS. Like, having a foreign object in your body is not the smartest thing. It is a source of inflammation. It could have been something that was also triggering autoimmune that my body was reacting to. So I do not at all regret getting them removed, but it just wasn't the full answer to my problems.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is I did feel like significantly better in the beginning of having them removed. So I do think it helped with something, but it wasn't enough. Without removing all the other poison in my diet, it wasn't enough to completely give me healing that I needed. So I remember feeling a lot significant relief in inflammation for like a solid like week or two, and then like everything just eventually came back because I was eating the same way. You know, it was mostly plant-based, but then I would have like I would still cook with like horrible oils, which because I didn't know about any of what I know now. And so all of these little things that I didn't know about were adding to the inflammation storm. And to make a long story short, fast forward to spring of 2021, and my symptoms just would not let up. And I'm getting so frustrated, so tired. And I finally go back for more MRI imaging. And that's when they discover the lesions. And there was like a little one in my cervical spine and a bunch in my brain. And I was like, it hit me like a bomb. I was like, oh my God, my life is over. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
That's how it felt. But I was also in denial too. So there was like this dichotomy of like, my life is over and this is a death sentence. Like people, I literally picture wheelchairs and like, I was so depressed because I'm a very like physically active person. Like I love sports and being athletic. And I was like, this, I can't even mentally handle this. Like, and then also I was in denial. I was like, no, this has to be wrong. So I even switched doctors because I was in that much denial, Emily. I was like, no, I want a different set of eyes looking at this. And hopefully I get a different answer. And hopefully they tell me I don't have MS. And I went to that second doctor and he confirmed that in fact, it is. In fact, he ran more imaging. There was even more lesions than my previous one. And he was like, I want you on meds right away. And I was like, wait, hold on. Because in that in between, I started to accept that there was a possibility I actually have multiple sclerosis. And so in that in between of switching from the first doctor to the second one, I started doing a ton of research and I found Dr. Terry Walls and her incredible success story. And I love her. And she's amazing. So she was my first glimpse of hope that something can be done dietary wise. Mm-hmm. And so she was my first glimpse. She completely reversed her MS and she had one of the worst kinds. And so she was my first glimpse of hope with that. And I brought that up to this new doctor and I was like, instead of meds, what do you think if I do this? And he's like, absolutely not. And first of all, he was like, wait, what is it? And I was like, the Walls protocol. And he was like, no, what is that? Some diet? And I said, yeah, like Dr. Terry Walls literally reversed her MS. And he laughed about it. He was like, no. He's like, absolutely. He's like, don't even think about that. You need to go on meds. And so, and I'm not like anti-meds, like some, the meds for MS have come around a lot, but like still I would, I just didn't like the idea of pumping my body with that. So anyway, I switched from him to a specialist and I really wanted to be seen by an MS specialist, still in hopes that like I would get like another answer, like, no, this is not MS. And by the time I got into his office, 6 more months had passed. So he ran new imaging and I was holding off on meds till I saw him. And his new imaging showed even more lesions. So this scared the living daylights out of me. And so I started on an infusion called Tysabri. And I was just so scared. But at the same month that I was starting Tysabri was the same month I discovered you. And I'll never forget I was in like such a dark depression. I never understood depression till I went through this. I never, I, by nature, I'm just, that's not my nature. I'm like a lot more lively spirited person, but this took me out. Like I just was so defeated, so depressed. I felt like it was hopeless. I was never going to get better. Um, I was so tired and defeated of chasing diets and chasing supplements and chasing things to help me get some relief of all of this hell. And because it was hell, like I haven't even described half of it, but because you went through it. But I'd be at work and just intrusive thoughts of like not wanting to be here anymore and being like, I can't do this. Everybody else is normal and they're functioning. And I am on an amphetamine, on Adderall, and I still can barely function. And I would come home and I would crash and I would be laid up I would be laid up for the whole weekend. My husband would have to take on all of the things because I couldn't do it. And my son would have to sometimes see me like that. And that was horrible. And I just remember getting the new MRI of more lesions and being like, I'm just going to keep going down the tubes.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is very vulnerable for me to admit this, but honestly, in one of my worst days, I was so depressed and felt so dark and everything. It was so taxing just to even be alive and be breathing and keep my eyes open. I remember laying in bed, literally, because I was thinking like, this is only going to get worse. It's just going to eat. I felt like my brain was literally being eaten alive.
Yeah.
Like that's how bad the brain symptoms were for me. And I remember thinking like, I'm just going to deteriorate and I can't let that happen. So I literally Googled, sorry.
It's okay. We've all done it. And not all. A lot of people have done it, but you're just brave enough to talk about it.
Yeah. I literally Googled like legal human euthanasia, which there is one in like Oregon.
Yeah.
And
Countries.
But I think the whole, yeah. And I remember hearing a story about it and I was like, maybe I can go there. And like, that's how I can go out with dignity because I'm just failing. I'm so sorry.
No, okay. We've all, not we all, but many of us have been there.
Yeah. And that's what I'm hoping this hits somebody and somebody can relate to it. Because if I can help even one person, and then it was all worth it. But I remember laying in bed all the time, all on my off time. I had to take so many days off of work and I would always be in bed and I would it just felt like I was living in this black cloud. And I remember just like yelling out one day, like yelling out to God, like, please, like send me something, send me a sign, send me something, like either get me out of this body and take me or get me better. Like send me a sign and I'll do whatever it takes. And I'm not kidding, Emily, like that week, somebody pointed me to you. And I'll never forget when I found your story. I was like, I can make it. Like I have a chance because she did this. And I've been doing it wrong the whole time. And I'll never forget that. You were like, I mean, not that Dr. Terry Wallace wasn't, but I just, first of all, I wasn't doing her protocol right. And it was a little too plant heavy for me. I felt like I was still reacting to plants. Aside from like, I did remove gluten and I felt like a little bit of alleviation from removing that. But aside from that, I don't think I was even doing it right. And it was just seemed too difficult for me. And when I found you and carnivore, it just, everything clicked. I was like, this is what I need. This is so, I needed simplicity because of the brain fog. Like I could not do anything difficult. I could hardly even read emails at work. I was failing at work. Like it was bad.
Yeah. And see, that was the same route that I went to Terry Walls because that's the Walls protocol. It's MS, she was in the zero gravity chair, like all the things.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I don't have a wife.
Yeah.
I have a wife that can prepare 8 cups of vegetables and
Yes.
do all
Yes.
that stuff. And then I was to the point where I couldn't use my hands, and
Oh God.
I couldn't like chop up all the vegetables, and I couldn't even go to the grocery store. So I got to the point where I could only hold onto the cart, go to the meat department, throw in like 5 ribeyes, go check out, go back to the car, take a break for 15 minutes, and
And
then
you're
drive home, and then get a stool in front of the stove and flip a steak. That is all I could. That was my activity for the day. That was it. And so I couldn't, it wasn't doable for me to do the protocol for Terry Walls. And that's
same.
why this worked for me. Do you remember the interview, who was interviewing me when the first one you saw? Or was it just me?
You know, that I don't remember.
That's
It
okay.
may have been just you. I don't 100% remember that. I just remember, so this is what happened. It was funny. After I had that like come to Jesus moment, like literally, I'm not even kidding. I literally shouted this out loud and like just had this like heart to heart with God. And I was like, please. I got a notification on my phone that in one of my Facebook groups, something I had asked a question about like months ago. And that's what makes it weird because I remember I had asked this question months ago and it was in relation to like something about MS. And I was like, does anybody know if this such and such anti-inflammatory helps with MS? Somebody wrote back to me and I thank God, I wish I could find that person. They wrote back to me and it lit up my phone and I was like, what's this? And they were like, Colleen, you need to look into the carnivore diet and look up Emily Penton. And she like completely resolved it. And I'll never forget that. And I've done a couple interviews and every one I bring you up. And like somebody alerted me and said carnivore diet and look up Emily Penton. And so you were literally like my window of hope and like my ray of sunshine and in the dark storm I was in. And I was like, oh my, I'll never forget that night. Like I suddenly perked up and I remember running to like show my husband and I'm like, look at this. I'm like, this girl has MS. She had bipolar disorder. She completely resolved all her issues. And I've been doing the opposite of what she's done. And I was like, I'm telling you, I think this is like what I've been missing. He was all for it. He was like, yeah, like whatever. Like I'm all aboard, especially like I love meat. Like he's a guy. So he's like, let's do it. So that next day I went carnivore and I really never looked back. I mean, I had some obstacles in the beginning, like obviously like the transition can be a little tricky because it's complete opposite. So I wasn't fat adapted. I definitely went through an oxalate dump. My kidneys and my knees were like on fire for a couple weeks. And I mean, that was to be expected because I literally was just oxalate bombing myself, not knowing. And a little bit of like bathroom issues because I adjusting to a whole new diet and a little bit of nausea in the beginning because I just wasn't used to eating fat. I was so scared away from fat from earlier years. So, but aside from that, my God, like I remember, and this resonated with me with your story where you were like, one day I just felt like a window of like, and I'll never forget you saying that. And I was like, I hope that happens to me. Like 3 or 4 days after going carnivore, I had a day where I remember I got to work and I was like, what is going on? Because I'm actually in a good mood. And I'm not so foggy. Like this is wild. Is this just a placebo? I literally I was like, is this just a placebo? And then from there, I mean, it was like, I would have like little hiccups, but from there, things just seemed to get better and better and better. And then May of 2023 was my last Tysabri infusion. I felt, which is risky, and I did it. I went off at my own risk. My doctor, this was not co-signed by him at all. He does not want me off of meds, and I understand. And I love my specialist. So I just want anybody out there that sees this to know, like, I love my specialist, and I love all the nurses and the staff there. So this is nothing against them, but you know, like, I don't think they understand how diet truly, I don't think they're trained for that. So I understand where they come from, where they want me on it, because they've seen so many horror stories, and they don't want to see me get worse. And I appreciate that. But the true test, because I started my infusion around the same time I found you and went carnivore. So my next set of MRIs were stable. So I'm like, well, I'm going to go off meds and give this a real test, which is a risk. And I know some people will be like, you know, I'm not spreading dangerous information. I'm not telling anybody else to go off of meds. Talk to your doctor. This was just crazy me feeling like I just feel the time is right for me to go off. And if I need to go back, I will. And so I went off my meds and I continued hardcore carnivore. And I also found an upper cervical doctor who did a little like atlas bone adjustment in my neck that I feel helped. And we could talk about more of that if you want, but I don't want to take up any more time. But anyway, fast forward to this past summer, just a couple weeks ago, August 14th, I just had my updated MRI, which was a year post being off of MS medication and almost 2 years carnivore, and it's stable. No new lesions. So I mean, so I'm just like, I just can't believe it.
That's amazing. Yeah, you posted the other day and I was just like, I remember that moment. I was in the van with my dad. My dad's driving and I got the notification on my phone that my results from my MRI were in my my profile. And so I went and I read them out loud. And I was like, Daddy, I was like, I have no new MS activity. And he just like literally stopped the van like in the parking lot. Like he pulled into a parking spot and turned his whole body. And he was like, you did it. Like it was just, it was the biggest gamble to go against, you know, the medical industry. And literally
Yeah.
my my neurologist was telling me, you are reckless with your health. You are going to be in a wheelchair, incapacitated, incontinent in 10.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm so grateful that I was able to be that story for you. Michaela Peterson was my story. And I remember reaching out to her one time when my neurologist said that. And I was like, Michaela, I was like, am I being reckless? And she goes, Emily, you have no symptoms.
Yeah.
You can go back on the meds or go on the meds whenever you have
Yeah.
symptoms. Like we can revisit this. But right now,
Yeah.
we're
Absolutely.
managing it with fatty animal meat.
Yes. Yes. And I love Michaela. She is also like, right after I found you, I went completely dove into the carnivore world, and she was like the next one I found, aside from all the you know, I found Dr. Chafee, Dr. Baker, Dr. Ken Berry, all the great doctors, and I love all of them. But I found she was like the second one after you that I found was so inspirational to me, because yes, she was riddled with autoimmune diseases, and the fact that it was, she like further cemented it for me. Like after I found you, she like further cemented it to me. Like this can all, like pretty much anything can be resolved with the right proper human diet. And now I've just been doing it wrong the whole time. And my body has been trying to tell me, but I was ignoring it. And so like all the lights went on in my head finally. And I was like, I connected everything. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I need to help people. But people don't know this. There's how many other people are there that are like me, that were suffering and going the wrong direction and doing the wrong things. And they just didn't know because they were being misguided. So I went and became a health coach, and I got my certification for health coaching. And again, like I was inspired by you for that too, because I felt so passionate like you did. I'm like, if I can get through that, like I need to do something with it. And that's another thing I told myself earlier on. Like I was like, I am going to make something of this, because there is no way I'm accepting this diagnosis without making a purpose of it. Like, it has to turn into a purpose. Like, I have to take these lemons and make lemonade somehow. And like, this just all, I feel like a calling to hopefully be a beam of light like you, and help somebody, even if it's not a ton of people. If I help just a few people, it was worth it, because I just hate the idea of people suffering needlessly.
Yeah. And like you said, just being deceived by really effective marketing. I mean,
Oof,
I gotta just like give it up to the vegan,
yes,
vegetarian like agenda. Like, well done.
they're
Like,
they're good.
well
They're very well done.
done.
They're very good at what they do.
Very good. And they pull in the heartstrings, they pull into like the spiritual
Mhm.
community. They pull in, I've even heard them using scripture, that
God.
it's not
Yeah.
biblical to eat meat and like all this stuff, like
Oh
well
gosh.
done. Like they've done a really, really, really good job.
Yeah.
I believe in and everybody gets a seat at the table. And so if
Yeah.
you're going to get a seat at the table to manipulate with all your like awesome marketing, I want a seat at the table just to tell you my story. That's it.
Same. Yeah.
I just want to tell you my
Yeah.
story. What's really cool is we've got doctors now that are doing all the science. So that's really
Yeah.
fun. But go back real quick because I want to get into your coaching. But I want to ask, whenever you
Yeah.
made that switch, what foods did you stop eating and what foods did you start eating?
Yeah, great question, because I always tell people when I meet people, especially in person, and they find out that I'm like doing so well with MS, and they find out that I'm using my diet as basically my tool. They're like, well, what do you eat? And I'll say like, well, I eat the carnivore diet. And they're like, well, what do you eat? And they're still like perplexed by it. And I'm like, well, you know what? It's actually more important what I don't eat. I feel like it's more important what I don't eat. Let's start with that. I'm like, I don't eat anything that's processed. I eat zero sugar and no carbs, almost no carbs, aside from some of the raw dairy that I do consume. And so I immediately switched to just like, I just cut everything off, like nothing, anything that was processed. I just didn't even look at it. Because prior to that, when I went gluten free, I was still a ding dong, and I didn't like fully read Terry Wall's book. And I went down the gluten free aisles, and I would buy like the gluten free prepackaged goods. And yeah, so I was like, oh God, when I always say, when I went carnivore, it was literally the best education I ever got. Because I became it was the first time in my life I truly became educated on our bodies and health, and like what we're truly naturally supposed to be eating. And I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I found out about seed oils right away. And I'm like, oh my God, I was eating so many things with seed oils in it from the gluten-free packaged crap. And it had all these fake starches in it, and like I didn't know. So I just went completely primal, like bacon, eggs, and just fatty meat. Like you inspired me to find like the fattiest fatty meat I could find. I started making my own bone broth. So my diet consists of mostly fatty lamb, fatty cuts of red meat. Mostly red meat is my meat. I mean, is my diet. But I drink egg yolks every day as like extra vitamins and healthy cholesterol. And I eat some raw meat and some raw organs. And I know you eat some. I know. Do you still eat your meat raw?
No, I did for 3.5 years.
Okay.
I ate only raw. I mean, I would go out to a steakhouse with my family, but
Yeah.
my main sustenance every day was raw, straight from the farm, raw beef and beef fat. And then one day I went to go take a bite and I couldn't even swallow it. My body just went, nope, we're done. And I was like, what?
Wow.
And my whole business is inner clarity system because
Yeah.
I tell people, don't do what Dr. So-and-so says, or this YouTuber, or what your aunt says, or what your cousin did. You got to
Yeah.
have that inner clarity, that inner knowing, that connection with your spirit and your body. And my body was giving me a clear message that we were finished with this 3.5 year phase of raw meat and that we
Okay.
were shifting to cooked meat. So I tried to reintroduce it 12 times because
Oh, wow.
because I loved it, because I didn't have to do extra dishes, because
Yeah.
I didn't have to cook. I had
Yeah.
less prep. It was so
Yeah. It's
easy.
easy. Yeah.
And I loved how it felt like in my stomach, but when I switched to cooked, my stomach was fine. It was almost like I healed,
Okay. Yeah.
and then
Like your gut
and then
needed
I
to heal.
didn't eat it raw anymore.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I eat some, I get like um, a a ground beef slash organ mixture from US Wellness Meats. They're awesome. And it's like kidney, liver, heart. And I remember when I first went carnivore and I found like you, and then I found some other, and even Dr. Terry Walls was like, you really should incorporate some organs. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can eat organs. But I was like, the level of, this is how you know I was desperate, because I don't think any normal person would just do this for the fun of it. But I was so desperate to be on the fastest track to healing. I was like, all right, I'm going to buy that organ mixture and I'm going to figure out a way to consume it. And I think I could do it if I like make it in like a smoothie form. Maybe I can drink it. And so I did do it, and I mixed it with a tiny bit of wild blueberries because I have no issues with those, and I don't eat them in large amounts. And I have access to Amish goods because I'm not too far from them. So I get Amish deliveries fresh off the Amish farms. Thank God for the Amish. And they have raw goat milk and raw goat kefir.
Yes.
And I love, my body like craves the raw goat milk, and I do, I don't react to it. And the raw goat kefir, I even make my own now. So I mix the raw organ meat and the raw ground meat with kefir and a little bit of blueberries, and I blend it and I drink it.
That sounds
And it
great.
honestly, it's so easy too to like bring to the beach or bring to work for the day, like for like lunch. It's so easy. I love carnivore bars.
Oh my
They've been,
gosh.
I
They are my
love carnivore bars.
favorite. They're
Yes.
okay. So I grew up 8 miles away from the creator of the carnivore bar.
Get out.
Yeah. We were
What are
in,
the odds?
I know, we were in
That's so funny.
the Michaela Peterson's Lion Diet Club. She used to have a
Oh,
paid group back in 2019.
oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and he commented on my post, or I commented on his or something. I click on his profile on Facebook and I'm like, holy Moses. And I'm like, dude, you're from Jackson? I'm from Cape Girardeau. And he's like, yeah. So we start talking. He tells me he's the creator of the carnivore bar. He's like, do you want to tour the factory? It's up in Columbia, Missouri. And I'm like, yes, please. I
Yeah.
took my
So funny.
kid, I took my son, and we drove. It was like 3 hours north, not where we're from,
Yeah.
but 3 hours north. And I was standing in the factory and he'd given me the tour and he said, okay. And I literally felt like I was in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, that's how I would feel.
That's how I felt, because I watched how they made them, and I watched the vats of meat, and I watched the vats of tallow, and I watched them add the salt, and I watched the machines. I watched them form the bars. I watched them put them in the packages. Like I literally felt like I
Wow.
was in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but a carnivore version. And he made this like almost like ceremony. He like took me into the stock room, and he showed me the stock room and everything, and how they put the packaged bars into boxes and then they tape them and everything. And he said, okay, Emily, I'm going to give you your first carnivore bar. And I was like, okay. and I opened it and I would have guessed there was a golden ticket in it because I felt like
Oh
that.
my God, that's how I would feel.
And I opened it and I took my first bite and my
Oh,
eyes rolled back in my head. And
oh,
my
same.
son's standing next to me and he's like, "Are you okay?" I was like,
Yeah.
"Give me a minute." Like
Yeah.
the balance of the dried meat and
Hmm. The
the
tallow.
tallow and the perfect amount of salt and
Yes.
the
Yes.
quality, like there's no like weird off taste of like, this
So good.
was a little bit
Yeah.
old or this beef probably is from Walmart. Like
Mhm.
it's so pure. And
Yeah.
I've been hooked ever since.
Me too. Oh my gosh, I love Carnivore Bar. So shout out to Carnivore Bar. We love you.
Yes,
Um,
Philip Meese.
yes, love it. I can't get enough of it. And some people are like, what is that made of? I'm like, no, it's so good. I swear it's so good. And it's actually like pretty filling. Um, but you don't appreciate things like the old me would have never, the old me would have been like, I would have thought this is all weird too. And that's another thing, like I want people to relate to. Like I wasn't always like this. Like it is doable. I loved junk food, and just like I remember I saw you were like, I used to eat cookie dough. I used to eat cookie dough. I used to eat all of the things that everybody else eats that are, junk food and addictive, and drinking wine all the time. And, that even like my craving for alcohol kind of went out the window
Isn't that
on
crazy?
carnivore.
Yeah.
And that, like, especially having MS, like that was a problem. Like I really, don't get me wrong, once in like on special occasions, I'll have like a drink or two. Very, very seldom now though. Like I'm like addicted to healing. I'm addicted to feeling good. I'm addicted to waking up and feeling awake. Cause for years, I would wake up and feel like a rotting freaking corpse, like a living zombie. So I'm like so much more addicted to my wellness than I am to eating the junk food, to eating any food or beverage. Just is not, it doesn't outweigh my drive for feeling and feeling well and healing. And so like when people say like that's too restrictive, I'm like, no, you know what's restrictive? Not being able to open your eyes in the morning and feeling like you're dying all the time. That's too restrictive. And when people tell me it's too extreme, I'm like, well, what's too extreme is being given a diagnosis, you have MS, and being given a handicap thing for your car, and labeled disabled, and you can't even read emails. I mean, at one point I was brought into HR because they were like, are you okay? And like, we know about your diagnosis, like here's your options, because like you're not functioning too well.
No, I
and
couldn't.
yeah,
It wasn't
and
even like
I'm
a try harder kind of a thing. I literally
yeah.
did not have the capacity to function.
And what's so deceiving is from the outside with MS, like you can look still okay and be completely not okay. And I like a lot of people don't know that. And I probably wouldn't have known that either unless till I experienced it myself. But like I would still get, I would put some makeup on. I would present myself at least well, because that at least would make me feel a little bit better, because I was so embarrassed. I don't know if you went through this, but I was so embarrassed to be sick and to be labeled as sick, to be associated with the word sick. I was so embarrassed of my symptoms and so I didn't tell people how horrible I felt. So people really didn't know for a long time that I like was experiencing this, that I was contemplating my life ever, that I was like, so like that my everything went so dark, like nobody could. And because to people's faces, I would show up at work and I always joke like I'll cry in the bathroom, but I come out and flash a smile. Like you won't know, you don't know how bad things like.
Yeah.
I hid it pretty well for a
Yeah.
pretty long time, like how bad I was. And at one point, I had like one of my superiors pull me in the office and was like, you gotta like what you have to like communicate what's wrong, because this is like an invisible thing. Like we can't, by looking at you, we can't tell what's wrong because you present well. And I'm like, I know I present well, but I'm not well. Like I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I missed that email because my vision would get wonky.
Yeah.
And it would be hard for me to look at a screen, and everything would kind of be distorted because it was messing with my vision a little.
Yeah.
And I remember just like everything just was too taxing. Like reading emails and keeping up with the emails and keeping up with this and that in my job. Like everything was so taxing. And it's a miracle it's a miracle I made it through and I'm still employed now. I mean, it
Yeah.
really is like, but
That's awesome.
it helped to get.
I
Well, I'm sorry.
remember one of my worst moments as far as being embarrassed of being sick was
Yeah.
I went through there was the car line,
Yeah.
picking up my son after school. And instead of parking in the car line, I needed to go and turn in the money for his field trip to the office because it was due that day. And
Yeah.
I had not given it. And so I had to park in the parking lot and walk with my walker into
Oh,
the school. And the entire car line was parked right there. And they've got nothing to do. They're not being,
yeah.
weird or anything, but the
Yeah.
entire car line is watching me walk with my walker, stumbling with my walker
Oh my God.
into the office. I get into the office and the secretary was like, oh, here, like sit down. Like she could tell I was struggling, And so
Yeah.
she was like, here's a chair. And so she gave me a chair so I could sit down. And she was like, what are you here for? And I said, I just need to give you this check for my son's field trip. And she was like, okay, well, and since it's so close to time, she was like, I'll just go ahead and call for Abram, my son, to come with you now. So you don't have to go back and wait in the car line. You can just go home. I was like, okay. So they called my son to the office. I think he was in, oh gosh, I don't even know what grade school,
Okay.
fourth, fifth, something like that.
Mhm.
And he walked in the office, saw me in the chair, saw my walker, and was mortified. And
Oh,
like, let's go. Let's get out of here. And then we walk all in front of the car line and he saw all the other parents looking at us and he was like, just go. Can you go faster? Just go faster. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, not only is this horrible for me to experience, like my
yeah.
baby is struggling. Like he's like, Mom, can you not come in the school again? Can you like send Nana or Papa? Like, just don't do that.
Oh,
And I was like, my son is embarrassed by my disability. And I
oh,
was
that's so
like,
sad.
yeah. And then thankfully, carnivore changed my life
Thank
and now I do
God.
carnivore.
Yeah, that's not talked about enough. Like I swear, like I could do a whole YouTube video on just that, like the embarrassment of like when you're sick, like it's a true testament how you really do. You never know what someone's really going through because I remember when my superiors did find out like my like official diagnosis, they were like, "Wow, like we never would think." Like you look pretty fine. And like I was never sorry, there's a call coming through. Um I was never, I didn't have spine lesions. So like my physical, like I could still walk, but the brain symptoms were so debilitating that, only by the grace of God and Adderall did I make it through my days. And yeah, I remember feeling so embarrassed for so long. And even to the point of not being afraid to even tell my family, even like my husband in the beginning. I mean, he's like so great, but I just didn't want to burden him.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't want to tell my parents how bad things were for me because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me too. Like I was afraid they would think I'm just being a hypochondriac. Like, and it was so unheard of. Like everybody else was like walking around normal. And I remember thinking like, I don't want anybody to know like how crazy my head feels, like how like I feel like I felt like I was going into like a early onset dementia. Like
Yeah.
it really did. I was that clouded and I was that fogged and I couldn't remember things. It was affecting my memory. I feel like I'm still recovering my memory.
Mm-hmm.
Like I still get easily like sidetracked and everything. So I feel like I'm still recovering that. But yeah,
Yeah. I
it was
remember I was on one phone call. I think it was with either a doctor or like an account of some sort, and they asked my middle name. And I was like, uh, uh, it starts with a B. Like
wow.
and it wasn't
Yeah.
me. It was just like that compartment of that must have been where my
The
lesion,
recall. Yeah.
wherever the lesion is, it distorts
Yes.
the
That
function
part.
of that part of your
Hmm.
brain.
Hmm. Yep. Oh, I remember not being able to answer. Like I had so many times of that, and at work, and I'd be embarrassed. I'd be like in like a post observation. I'm a teacher, so I'd be like in like a post observation meeting, and they would ask me basic questions, and I'd be like, and they're like, and what student is that? And I like couldn't remember their names. I'm like, oh my God, I look like the worst teacher in the world right now because I couldn't remember names.
Yeah.
And I swear there was probably times my principal probably thought I was like on something or smoking something because I was just like I came off like really dumb. Like I was like, oh my God, like but she just doesn't understand. And I didn't even want to get into explaining it because I felt embarrassed. I really did feel embarrassed about it. And I didn't want to tell anybody like just how bad my brain was really compromised that bad.
Yeah.
And sometimes it would even affect my speech.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I noticed it would affect my speech at times, but I like never would tell anybody that. Even my parents would be shocked to probably hear that because I never wanted anybody to know that.
But we know our voice, we
But
know the
I knew
talk, and we know
yeah,
whenever it's delayed or distorted.
yes, and that's another thing is we were like hyper aware. I was hyper aware of like where I was failing, and like and that's why I swear that's why I looked up what I looked up because I was so mortified and so the level of depression was just so hard. I could not fathom watching myself continue to deteriorate and just like let myself go into a state of like complete dementia and like just let myself become a burden to people.
Yeah.
I so I acted on it. That's why the second I found you, I was like, I'm jumping in. Like there's no going back. Like I'm jumping in. I'm doing whatever I can because I don't want to be a burden and I want to be able to live a normal life more than I crave junk food. Like more than I want to go out and eat fast food or junk food. I'll give up whatever I have to give up as long as it gives me a quality of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to shift really quick. Thank you so much. This has been such an incredible conversation. And we probably need to wrap it up because anybody who is suffering with
Yeah.
the brain fog that we did before probably has to chop this conversation up into
Yeah.
chunks. Because I know for me, my capacity was like 5 to 10 minutes. I could
Oh
only,
yeah.
watch. But I want to talk about your coaching because um as amazing as I am, the need is greater than my capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had to specialize. To the the reason that I've specialized is because I've found what I am the best at. And
Yeah.
I work with very intensive clients who
Mm-hmm.
have schizophrenia,
Wow.
borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, suicidal ideation, drug
Mm.
abuse, alcoholism. I deal with the people who are coming out of the prison, they're coming out of psych wards. I help people who their parents or family bring them to me and say, we've taken them to the psychiatrist, we've done all the things, we've done all the therapies, you're our last hope. And so
Wow.
I help the really, really tough ones, which is great, but I don't have the capacity or the time to
Mm.
help other people who are just trying to put together a food plan for MS, or who are just trying
Yeah.
to get some
Lose a couple pounds.
um
Yeah.
and why I love to display you is because people come to me and they're like, I can't afford you. And I'm like, you can't afford me because you don't need me. Um,
Mm.
so it's $111 just to talk to me for 30 to 60 minutes. And then to
Mm.
work with me for 2 months, it's $6,500 because of the level of intensity that I literally have clients who cuss me out and hang up
Wow.
on me because I have the capacity to hold their crazy, and to
Okay.
love them through that, and to literally hold their hand whenever they won't listen to doctors, they won't listen to anybody else, but they'll
Yeah.
listen to me because I come from crazy. I come from the
Right.
trenches. I can speak their language. So the reason I say all that is that I can't help everybody, but
Yeah.
I can 100% defer and refer um,
Yeah.
everyone that can and needs a coach like you to you. So
Yeah.
just give us a snapshot of what you are able to do.
So that's a good question because I feel like I'm still learning that as I go.
Everybody's
I,
different.
yeah, I feel like I'm still learning that as I go. And um, I know what you mean about like sometimes you take on because I've had clients that are like they dump all their complaints on me and they're like kind of borderline pissed at me
Yep.
because they don't like this. But I warned them always in the beginning. I'm like, listen, you're not always gonna like this, but like, and it can be a tough transition. Cravings are difficult, but we're gonna get through it. Like, we're gonna get through it and just think about what's more important. Like on the other side of this is what's more important. And it can be frustrating, and but I'm still learning as I go. Like, um I have anywhere from clients who just are like healthy and just want to get in shape and lose weight to MS patients that are struggling to even walk. So I have a little bit of a variety there right now, and I don't know what I'm better at yet because I'm still a newbie really with it at this
But you're
stage.
but you're able to give them a framework.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I hope that I'm able to inspire them the right way. And some of them are doing great, but some of them fall off because they're just like they just can't hack it. And that can be, like, we were talking about how, sometimes it can feel a little defeating because I do come into contact with so many people that say, like, I just could never do that. That's too restrictive. That's too extreme. And I'll miss this and I'll miss that. And I'm just like, don't you miss walking more than you miss chips? Don't you miss like your brain being normal more than you miss ice cream and cake and candy and sugar? Like that's, but I think it takes a little bit of food psychology. So I always tell my clients this is something I think I specialize in, is helping like food relationships and like your relationship with food has to change.
Yes.
And so there's like a psychology involved in this. And I tell every one of my clients that like my food psychology is so real. And for me, like I don't eat anything. Like everything that I do now is like completely different than what I used to eat and who I used to be. I would have told you you are out of your mind if you're going to tell me I'm going to eat raw oysters. I'd be like, that is disgusting. I now eat raw oysters because I found out how good they are for you.
And
And
there's
I just want that nutrition.
I
And I eat raw meat smoothies. Like I would have told you, no way, never gonna happen. Like, no way. So just like my relation, when I look at the more I wanted to heal, the more willing and open I became to connect. Like how I look at these foods is totally different. And the more that I see them as healing things for me, and like this is something that's going to heal me, the more I look at it like that, the more I crave it, and the more I want it, and the easier it becomes to have it. And the more I look at those other foods that I used to love and crave, the more I look at them as the toxin, the thing that was making me sick and causing me to hate my life, the more I do not miss them, the more I do not want them. So that psychology right there, is that connection is what I try and work on with people, because that's what they need. If you don't change that relationship and how you view that food, it won't be easy to do this. Like it became so easy for me to do this because of that connection and that relationship.
Yeah, that mindset. And then also you offer accountability, because
Oh yeah.
a lot of people, just because they watch a video on YouTube, if they
Right.
don't have a witness and they don't have
Mm-hmm.
accountability, then it's like they can't get an anchor in what they're doing. And so you offer that, to them as
I
well.
do, yeah. That's part of my program, is accountability coaching. So like I have them report to me what they eat, and we give them I give them like a guideline, and I have some people that are really into that and they like it, and that makes my job so much easier. So I do offer a free consultation call as of now. I mean, that could change. If I find that it's getting too busy, like that'll have to change. But as of now, I offer free consultation, and my pricing's a little more manageable right now, just because I'm still only a year in, really, and so just getting my feet wet and getting a feel of it, and getting to learn how I am as a coach with people, and just learn how I can better help people, then I'll go from there. But it's been a challenge, but it's been rewarding too.
That's
So
awesome. Well, I can't
yeah.
thank you enough, because there's no way that I could meet the need. And so I just want to shout from the rooftops about coaches
No.
like you, who've been through the trenches,
Yeah.
you didn't learn all of this in a book. You learned all of this through experience. And that is more powerful than, in my opinion, any certification and any degree. So thank you so much for your service to people. And my favorite thing is your name on Instagram. Instead of Beach Body on Demand, it is
No shade.
no shade, but instead of Beach Body on Demand, where we're having shakes and whatever supplements they have.
Yeah. Salads and what
I know.
bars.
It's hilarious. I love Beachbody, by the way. I love Beach. Um, Instead of Beachbody on Demand, it is Beef Body Healing on Instagram. And you can reach out to Colleen DeFrancesco.
DeFrancesco, it's fine.
DeFrancesca. And send her a personal message. That's the best way to contact her, is on Instagram. If you are not on Instagram, I'm going to put it in the show notes. It's Colleen DeFrancesca Francesco at gmail.com. That's COLLEEN DEFRANCESCO at gmail.com. Long,
Sorry, that's a long one.
necessary. No, but I'll put it in the show notes so you guys have it verbally and you also have it written. And then obviously, if for some reason you can't figure it out, send me a message. I will group message you with Colleen. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to add before we end this beautiful conversation?
I know this was the best conversation. Nothing for now. We could always meet again. I love talking to you. This was like sent from heaven, I swear, because I'll never forget when I first found you. I just had it. I just had so much hope because of you. And I remember thinking, like, one day we're gonna talk, and I'm gonna be a lot better than I am today. And like, today's the day, and it's
Here
just
you are.
it's so incredible. So hard work pays off. People, please consider, just consider
Trying.
just consider looking into it, and you'd be super. And I always tell everybody this, because when people say I could never be that strict or that restrictive, I always tell them you would be so surprised what you would do if you're desperate. So if you want to feel good that bad, you'll figure out a way to do it, and it's worth it. It's so worth it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you so much, Emily.
All right. Bye.
Bye.